2006 Honda CR-V all-wheel drive rear wheel bearing replacement. I'm Brian Essie from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you through the process of changing that out. To get started, we need to get the vehicle up in the air, and if you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands, and you want to jack it up by the body over here, and you want the suspension hanging. So after you achieve that, I'm working on the driver side here, but the process is the same for the passenger side. So whatever side of wheel bearing you're doing, go ahead and remove that tire. The next step is we're going to remove the caliper and caliper bracket. And to get started with that, we're going to remove the 12 millimeter bolt here that holds the brake hose on to the spindle here. So we're going to remove that. And then on the back side of the caliper, there's going to be two bolts. There's one here and one on the bottom of the caliper here. So we're not going to remove the two outer ones here. We're going to leave those on, just the two inner ones here and a little bit up here. So after getting the caliper and bracket off, I just hung it up onto the sway bar over here out of my way. You don't want it to hang by the brake hose if you can help it. So if it tends to fall over, you may secure it with a zip tie or a bungee cord or something. Next step is we need to get the rotor off. And they have these Phillips screws to hold the rotor on, and you're going to need an impact screwdriver. So the screwdriver designed to fit in here, and what you do is you strike it, the end of it, with a hammer, and it has a little mechanism that helps break the bolt free. So after getting the screws off, then you can pull your rotor off. So after you get the screws out, if your rotor is still stuck on, what you can do is take an 8x125 bolt, thread it into, there's a couple threaded holes on the rotor. You can thread it in there, then you can use an air ratchet or anything really, and just screw it inwards, and that'll pull the rotor off the hub here, and then you can slide the rotor off. Now that we got the rotor off, the next step I'm going to do is remove the ABS sensor, which is on the back side of the backing plate here. So you're going to remove the 10 millimeter bolt here and pull the sensor out and just set it up here on the suspension. And then after that, we're going to do is we're going to remove the park brake shoes and remove the cable here. And the reason why is we're going to take this whole backing plate and spindle off over to our press and press the bearing in and out. And so we need all this removed. Okay, to get these park brake shoes off, you're going to need a tool that looks like this. And that mounts into the clip here. So this little slot here mounts on the little ear here in this slot. So once you get it in there, you push in and twist. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. And then you'll also need a large flat blade screwdriver. You're going to start by removing the two clips on the outer sides. So you'll push in and rotate the little clip until it pops out of its slot here. And then the shoe will come forward a little bit. We'll do the same on this side. Then with your flat blade screwdriver, you're going to slide underneath and spread it till the adjuster comes out like that. And I like to set them aside the way they are. One side will pop out like this, so just set it aside so you'll know how it goes back on later. And now you squeeze these shoes together and remove the bottom spring like this. And now what I do is I just flare the spring and assembly off like that. And now what we need to do is we need to get this cable off here. So I just flare the spring back, and it has a little hook right here. So you just flare it back, and you take it off like that, and you set it aside. Now on the back side, there's two 10 millimeter bolts that hold the cable itself on. So you remove the two 10. So after getting the cable unbolted, you'll just pull it through your backing plate and set it aside. And also want to remove the little pins that hold the brake shoes down. The next step is to remove the axle nut, and I'm going to use an impact gun and run the nut off. So after getting our axle nut off, we need to get the spindle off completely. And before we do that, on the back side towards the bumper, this cam bolt here adjusts the alignment So you want to mark it. So what I did was I took a little white out and then marked it here, and then on the opposite side here I made a little alignment mark there too. So when I put this back together, I can get this back in the ballpark and my alignment won't be totally screwed. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the nut here on the end and slide this bolt through, and these two cams will come off with it. And then on the inner side on the bottom is another nut and bolt. So the nut will be on this side, and remove the bolt so you'll slide it out. So once you get the bottom free, then the last step would be to remove the nut and bolt here, or the nut, and pull it off, and then the whole assembly will come off. So now that we got it off, the next step is we're going to mount this in the vise, and we need to get this hub off. So we need to, what I do is I use a socket that I've sacrificed, and it happens to be a 27 millimeter, and it fits perfectly inside the bearing and hub, but it's slightly smaller than the actual bearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this in one of these ears in the vise, and I'm going to strike this with a hammer down, and that'll pop, that'll knock the hub out. Okay, now that we got the hub off, here in a little bit I'll show you how to remove the erase off the hub. We're going to reuse this hub. If your hub is worn out or scarred in any way, shape, or form right here, then I recommend you replace the hub. So the next step is to remove the snap ring. So you're going to use your snap ring pliers and you remove the snap ring. Now that I got the snap ring off, I need to get an adapter to fit over the hub here, and I'm going to borrow it from my hub grappler toolkit. This is an amazing toolkit for doing bearings and stuff. It's also available at howtoautomotive.com on the tools and product page. If you need something like this, it's a great tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the proper adapter that fits over the hub here, and we're going to press the bearing out through it. So after finding the proper hub adapter that fits over the bearing like this, we're going to set it up in our press. So now with my adapter on the flat plate on the press here, I got my spindle set up like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find a pressing plate to press against the bearing. So I found one that fits perfectly linear. It's not too big. And then now we need to fill in the gap here for our compressor. I'm just going to use a couple sockets. And now we're going to just press the bearing out the bottom, and it's going to fall into this little spacer here that we put underneath it. That popping noise is the bearing freeing up as it's pressing out. It's normal. Now as you can see, the old bearing is inside a little spacer here we use from our hub grappler kit. So now that the bearing is out, we need to find another adapter that fits inside this housing like that, so it fits perfectly in there. And what we're going to do is flip this upside down and press the new bearing in from the other way. And you can use this hub grappler tool itself to actually pull the bearings in and out, but I find it a lot easier and safer just to use the press. But if you bought this tool, you actually don't need the press. You could actually do this without a press with just using this tool. So with the spacer underneath like this, if it flipped upside down now, everything's nice and level to press in the new bearing. So before we put our new replacement bearing in, I wanted to show you something. The ABS sensor itself is actually built into the bearing, and if you press this in backwards, it'll set the ABS light. So you need to determine which way the bearing goes. And like I said, the sensor is built inside the when we go to put this bearing in, like I was saying earlier, they have a certain way they go in, and the way to determine that is, so on this particular one, the ABS sensor is on the back side, so we need the pickup to be in the back here. And the way we determine that, so inside the bearing there's like a little device that's magnetic inside of it, and the way it the signal is set from the top, sensor picks up the magnetic signal as it spins around. So that's how it works. So the way to determine is you take the new bearing and you put a paper clip down. If you can't pick it up like that, the sensor's not on that side. If you flip it over, and now you can pick it up, that tells you that the sensor is on this side. So now this side needs to go towards the back, towards the where the sensor mounts in the hub here. So after determining which way your bearing goes in, you can slide it in. On some brands they'll actually be marked exactly which way it goes in, but some don't. So now what you're going to do is you're going to center everything up. You're going to put it in there, and you're going to use a spacer like this to press on. You want to press on the ring where the bearing rides. You don't want to press on the seal itself. So you find the proper adapter like this, and then you're going to just press it in until it bottoms out, and you'll feel it. Now our bearing is pressed in. We need to put the snap ring back in. And if you don't have snap ring pliers, these are also available at howtoautomotive.com on the tools and product page. So we're going to reuse our hub on mine, and we need to get this bearing race off. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a die grinder like this, and I'm going to make it at an angle like this. I'm going to make a cut about 3/4 of the way through it, being careful not to grind into the hub itself, and being careful not to grind all the way through. So I'll show you the cut, and then once we make the cut, I'm going to use a punch and a hammer and hit it, and it'll crack it, and then it'll be able to slide off easily. So now that the race is pressed off the hub, you want to inspect the hub, make sure it's in good shape and no scarring or anything like that, and determine it's in great shape. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a spacer like this, and I'm using it from my hub grappler kit again, and I'm going to make sure it fits over the silver part of the bearing race, just like that. And I'll show you how we're going to set it up in the press to press the hub back in. So I'm going to use a spacer on the flat plate like this. This happens to be a socket. Then I'm going to use that adapter that we fit on the inside of the bearing, and I'm going to put it like this. Now I'm going to fit the spindle on the adapters like this, and then we're going to put the hub on top. So now with the spacer here, making contact with the inside of the bearing in there, spindle on like this, hub on. Now I got a little spacer here between my press. Now I'm going to just press the hub straight down until it bottoms out. You'll feel it. It'll stop. Our hub and bearing is pressed back into the spindle. I'm going to slide the axle through, and then I'll mount the top ear of the spindle here with the bolt, and I'll start it, and I'll leave the bolt loose, but I'll just thread it in a few threads, and then I'll swing the bottom down and put those into the purchase here on the lower control arm, and then put the bolts in. So before I put the spindles through back on, I'm going to put a little blue Permanex thread locker on the bolts, and that helps prevent the bolts from vibrating loose and coming back off. And so I'm just going to put a few dabs on the bolts, and you can get this at howtoautomotive.com on the tools and product page. So just a few dabs of the thread locker is all you need. So now that I got all the spindle back on and all the bolts are started, I'm going to line up my alignment marks with the eccentric cam bolt here and torque this down to 47 or 42 foot-pounds. And the torque specifications, I got from All Data. So when torquing the bolts down, you don't want to jerk the torque wrench. You just want an even, steady pressure until it clicks. And that's how, and that's all you need to do to torque the bolts down. So now we need to run the top bolt all the way in and torque it down to 69 foot-pounds, and then the bottom bolt down here, we're going to run it in and torque it down to 69 foot-pounds also. Next, we need to run the axle nut in and torque it down. We need to torque the axle nut to 134 foot-pounds, and it's very important that you get the torque right on the wheel bearings. The actual squeezing of the axle shaft and the hub together is actually what keeps the bearings together. If this is too loose, it'll actually cause the bearing to wear up prematurely. So the torque spec is pretty vital on this one. So the way I do it, because I'm by myself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screwdriver, pry bar, and I'm going to put it on in between the studs here and screw on a few lug nuts so I don't damage the threads. Now that we got our axle nut torqued, we need to indent the there's a little notch in the end of the axle, and so we need to indent the axle nut in, and that helps prevent it from backing up. You can use a punch and a hammer and just strike it. I'm kind of lazy. I'm going to use my impact gun here because I already had it sitting out, so you just dent it in like that, and that's all you need to do to get your axle nut set. Next step is we're going to feed the park brake cable through the back and tighten and put the two 10mm bolts on and tighten them up. So after getting our park brake cable routed through and the bolts back on and tight, I'm going to go ahead and put my ABS sensor in. So I'm going to slip it in the back, slide it in the hole, and then I'll just start the nut, the 10mm nut, and just tighten it up until it's snug. Next, we're going to start putting our park brake shoes back together. So we're going to take the pins that we took out and go ahead and slide those back through the backing plate, both left and right side. So here are all the parts that we need to reassemble our emergency brake shoes. So we're going to start with this little spring here, and you got your park brake shoe that has the lever on it. So you're going to take this spring and you're going to put it in the tiny hole in the back right here and flip it over. Now you're going to take this little lever and you're going to hook it in the spring here, and then you're going to pull it until this notch lines up with the notch in here. So when you're done, it'll look like this. Next, we're going to do is take the spring that looks like this. The top and bottom ones are the exact same spring, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up. And you're going to hook it on that hole, and then you're going to hook this end of the spring in this hole here. One hand on the right shoe and the one hand on the left shoe, you're going to pull the spring apart and then slip this little notch in here. So when you're done, it's going to look like this. Now what we need to do is take this whole assembly, and we need to hook this little cable back on the arm here. So we're going to hook this cable. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the spring back, and I'll show you how to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to take a pair of side cutters like this, and we're going to slip it behind the spring right here, and we're going to lightly squeeze it, but you don't want to cut the cable, you just want to lightly grab it. And you're going to take a pair of pliers on the nose of this, and you'll pull with the pliers towards yourself and push the cable back with the side cutters. And then once you got a pretty good gap, you'll squeeze the side cutters where it doesn't slide the cable back. Now you're going to take your park brake shoes and you're going to slip the cable in behind, and then once it's in behind, you'll release the tension from the spring.
Tacos right by the tire.
Now that that's on, what we're going to do is we're going to flare this open a little bit and slip it around this hub here. And once it's in there, then I'm going to hook the back one in, and I'm going to use fingers and pry it like so until it's over. And then I'll flip it around like that. I'm gonna mount this side. I'll mount this side first. So I'm gonna put the pin through. So I'll put the pin through, and I'll use my fingers on the back side to hold the pin through. And then I'll put the clip that looks like this, and I'll put it on, and I'll use my tool to press it and turn it until it locks into the little keeper right there. Okay, now that that one's on, now what I'm going to do is take my adjuster, I'm going to put it in here like this, and if you're strong enough you can do it by hand and pull the spring out. If not, what you can do is use a flat blade screwdriver like so, and spread it until it pops into place. And if you want to, you can screw them all the way in to make it a little easier so you don't have to pry it as hard, but you'll have to adjust afterwards. Okay, so now that the adjuster's in, the spring is in, now what we do is put our spring on the back, the other side back on. And once that's on, now all you're going to do is make sure everything's centered in here and kind of give it a tap back and forth and make sure you like it where it's at. And then after that, we're going to slide the rotor on and adjust the adjuster screw here until there's a light drag on the rotor, so you can slide it on, adjust it a couple clicks to adjust the shoes out until there's a nice park brake shoes are adjusted to a nice little drag. Basically, you just want these shoes to touch the insides of the drum part of the rubber plug here, and then line it up with the adjuster and adjust it until the with the screwdriver poke through and adjust the adjuster. And then once you get the adjustment the way you like it, go ahead and put your screws in that held the rotor back into place. Too tight, so I'm going to back it off a few threads. So now that the rotor's on, I'm going to clean my fingerprints and stuff off the old rotor. So I'm going to use a little brake clean and just spray off that and give my rotor a good wipe down. If you get grease and stuff on brake rotors and pads and stuff, it can cause squeaks. So I'm going to wipe this down real good and make sure there's no fingerprints on it. So I'm going to put a little of this thread locker, Permanex thread locker on the threads, and then I'm going to put the caliper back on, and we're going to torque these bolts down to 41 foot-pounds. And when you put this on, you want to make sure that this brake cable here is not twisted. So you may have to make sure that the pads didn't slip in, and you'll slide it back over the brake rotor like that, and then start your two bolts with the thread locker on it, and torque them down to 41 foot-pounds. Okay, now that the caliper's back on the torque, we need to take the 12mm bolt that held our brake hose on and reinstall that and tighten it. Now that we got the brake hose bolted back up, that pretty much completes the job of replacing the wheel bearing. The only last step is to put the wheel on and torque it down to 76 foot-pounds. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, and invite you to come over to howtoautomotive.com. And if you need any tools and products, you can get those are available on the tools and product page. I'd like to thank you again for watching my videos.